Life Coach Friday. We do this every other Friday, and we stream onto multiple community pages because Life Coach Friday is all about creating a better community, a stronger community, being better members of our community. So joining us as usual is Life Coach Annette Walters. Hello, Annette.
Hello, Natalie. I am so excited to be here today. This is going to be a fun topic. I have struggled with this in the past, and yeah, this is going to be a good one.
It is. And what we're chatting about today, and as usual, we want to hear from you, which is why we're doing this live. Go ahead and share your comments and any questions, and we'll answer them on the fly as we go along. Today, we're talking about imposter syndrome. Have you ever had a situation where you're really good at what you're getting a good result, but you just feel suddenly like I'm a fraud. People are going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing. Yet there's evidence to the contrary that you do know what you're doing and you are doing a good job. This is something that I think many of us have experienced, and it can really hold us back, and it can show up in a few different ways. There's what I was just saying about in the work that we do. It could be in the way that you show up, maybe to a new community or a new friend group. There's just a bunch of ways, right, Annette?
hmm There are. It has shown up in my making friends. It has shown up on the job. If anybody followed me for very long, you know that I'm a writer. I love to write. It's one of those things, and yet, um, this imposter syndrome will show up and I won't put my work out into the world because I think that it's less than that, it's not meeting the mark, that I'm going to get criticized. Basically, I'm going to be found out as a fraud, that that I don't know what I'm talking about, and yet, it's like you said, um I've got all of this evidence to the contrary. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I became a life coach, is because of the results that I got in my life through life coaching and my life coach. And then it was and so I have all of this evidence. Oh, I'm moving all around. I love
Yep.
that.
I had it. We Something just went kablooey there, but I got you back on.
That's okay. That's why you're sitting on the technical side and I am not. So there we go.
There we go.
See, people, we'll get this going. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So, a lot of times when we're talking about
It's
imposter
because I'm an
syndrome,
imposter. I obviously don't know what I'm doing.
God, we have the best time. We just do. Thanks. Welcome to our inner world. This is what it looks like when you're not actually watching sometimes. So, but it's one of those things where we're so worried about being found out. Um, it's a lot of times in my past, it has been because of moving around. I think I've shared a couple of times that I've moved over 15 times in my life.
That's
I have had
crazy.
I have adapted to all these different places. Have I frozen on your screen a couple of times, or am I still kind of live?
You froze a little bit, but I can still hear you well. So even though
Okay.
you're kind of glitching here and there, I think we're having a little bit of a connection issue, I think, on your end there in Texas.
I think I am too, and I'm not quite
Hmm.
sure why, because all of my people are not on the internet right now. So we will continue on. So, but when it has showed up in my life is um, I'm actually very good at meeting people and getting to know who people are. It's just part of relocating so many times. And yet, it'll show up where I get super nervous, like, oh, they're going to figure out that I don't belong in this community, or they're going to judge that I shouldn't be here. And that has kept me from going to doing things with new groups that I've wanted to do. It is it is it is one of the things. Oh, and I talked about this week in my newsletter that I sent out, and it is about putting on a mask, not the masks we've been wearing for the last 2 weeks or 2 years, but really literally the facades that we put on to be acceptable to other people. And so when I showed up like that, then I wasn't showing up as myself. I was really more of a practiced chameleon. And one of the bad things that happened by that was my answer to this imposter syndrome was to become a chameleon, but that meant that I didn't show up as me, which has
Uh,
really led to not being able to make relationships hardly at all through most of my life because I thought being a chameleon was who I was. But that wasn't actually allowing anybody to see me, and so that was kind of the effect of the imposter syndrome for everything that I went into.
how did you figure that out when you spotted that? Because I think that's something that is really common, especially when we're if we're moving to a new area, meeting new people, different friend groups, where it does seem sometimes it's easy to kind of sit back and then just see what everyone else is doing, and like you said, kind of chameleon your way in there. How did you spot that, and did that then change how you interacted with groups once you were aware of it?
It how I spotted it and did it change? I'm gonna start with the last question first. The change was dramatic, and I would say the biggest part of that change happened, about a year ago. I mean, it took me I've been life coached, I've had a life coach, and I've been certified as a life coach for a number of years now, and it really took me up until about a year ago to understand what I was doing because in a lot of ways it was working for me. It was kind of my modus operandi, if you will. And, and I could function in the world and I could have, certain connections and they worked. But there was that nagging that, there's got to be something more to life than than what it is. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time why I couldn't find friends. I've got a
Mm.
couple of really close girlfriends. You and I have sustained for a number of years, but new people would kind of shy away and that is what that curiosity, that pain point of not being able to make friends the way that I thought I should, really kept pushing that sore spot until I figured it out. And it was through the help of my life coach because she kept the curiosity going. Okay, well there's that, but then why?
Uh,
What are you making that mean? It was a lot of those same questions that we go through, together. And so it was, coming out at time after time and taking off that identity of being a chameleon. I had to do that first, and really almost understand who I am to understand this other part. And yeah, but it has slowed me down and kept me from doing a number of things.
so what do you think, how do we know the difference between when it's imposter syndrome versus we really don't know what they're doing? What would be some of those cues? I can only speak from my own experience. When I've experienced this, I remember one specific time, and it was early in when I was working in social media. I did social media management and digital marketing, and I was getting really good results for a client of mine. It was going really well. It was exceeding everyone's expectations, including my own. So I was doing the things that I should be doing and getting the results that I was trying to get. And I just had this moment when it was going really well that, wait, how is this happening? I don't know what I'm doing. And it was, looking back, I can see that as that's so ridiculous, because if I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have been getting the results that I was getting. So I do
Mhm.
know what I'm doing. But it just feels, that moment of, oh my gosh, how is this happening? I think
Mhm.
that's definitely was imposter syndrome versus times when, I might enter into something and realize, okay, there's things I need to learn about this. Like, anything to do with my car. I have no clue. I have to watch a YouTube video. I'm terrified to put air in my own tires. It just goes on and on.
Exactly.
So there, I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't feel like
Mhm.
an imposter. But how can we kind of really differentiate and see those cues to take a step back and not go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, that rabbit hole. The difference between the rabbit hole and just not, having fear based on I don't know what I'm doing. The difference is really how where the focus is. If the focus is on yourself, basically you've kicked in your fight or flight and it's time to protect yourself. We need to build a wall so that nobody, finds out that I can't do this. As opposed to just being embarrassed about maybe I don't know how to put air in my tires. If you are, you don't need to be embarrassed, Natalie. It's okay. Lots of people don't like to do it. It's okay. We all might overinflate and then God knows what would happen. But, it's when you know the difference because fight or flight will kick in. That's the point at which you find yourself going, "Oh, I better watch what I say," or "I better, say the right thing so that I will be acceptable to other people, so that I will be perceived as confident." When we are, just when we just don't know how to do something, that's when we're not distracted by the perception of others, but we are willing to, more dive in and figure it out. Or in my case, the other day, I went by the tire store and had them fill up my tires with air. And so it was one of those things where the difference between imposter syndrome and just not knowing how to do and maybe being embarrassed or fearful that somebody might uncover it, because imposter means that you're trying to put up these walls, put on this facade like I was talking about before to get people to like you. And it almost comes with an agenda of what you want on the back end. And so in imposter syndrome, it's not like you're trying to trick people, but it's that you don't want to be found out. And with that, it let me find the words really quick. It it has, as I said, it has everything to do with the fight or flight. If that automatic brain has kicked in and you've got about 52 thoughts in your head that are completely distracting you from what you actually want to do, and it has to do with they're going to find me out or I'm going to be perceived as not credible, that is when imposter syndrome has kicked in,
Mm.
because you're so distracted, if you will, about this being found out, being found not competent, that is when it has kicked in. And it really is that automatic brain trying to protect you. The big thing I want to let you know is that nothing has gone wrong here. Imposter syndrome is just something that happens to all of us, and it comes from that automatic side of our brain that kicks in the fight or flight to literally keep us safe. The thing is that right now in this day and age, there is no tiger around the corner that's going to consume you. And so that fear that we have is a little bit unfounded, but it is part of our programming. And if our brains can get us to shut down, to build those walls, and even though we may be miserable in those walls, it has done its job. And so it continues on until we realize, wait, I don't have to walk through this in this way. Am I still
I
glitching?
no, I had muted myself. And just so everybody knows, I'm getting over bronchitis, so I have to mute to cough. So you really get to see a lot of how the donuts are made today. Um, that makes a lot of sense. And it really does seem that when we go down that rabbit hole of having those feelings around feeling like we're actually an imposter, when the reality is we know what we're doing and we actually are competent. I really like what you said, because that distraction, now we might actually act or behave in ways that aren't competent because we're just
Mhm.
in our heads about this,
My
rather than
gosh.
just continuing on and doing the work that we're doing and celebrating our wins along the way.
Mhm.
It just seems so, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
It does. It does. And in one of the other ways that this will show up is in, you kind of tapped in on is perfectionism. Because when we are so focused on ourselves and getting it exactly right before we put something out there or we show up, when we have imposter syndrome, perfectionism really does kick in, and it keeps us from actually being focused on whatever it is that we really want to do. I know that sounds kind of odd, but we almost get into perfectionism so that we aren't found out, so that we're not judged as incompetent. And
Ah.
so how can we really be focused on doing this thing well when we're so focused on it, but it needs to be perfect. And perfect is generally designed by other people, not by what we are trying to do or trying to create.
So then you're saying it's possible then if we're focused too much on doing something perfectly, we kind of lose sight of the big picture of accomplishing the goal that we're actually trying to accomplish and getting
Mhm.
too hung up on making everything look and seem like it's so perfect. Because when I think of perfectionism, I think of that it's every, not anything not out of line, an I not dotted, just this, just perfect, no
Mhm.
errors. And so what you're saying is we can even kind of get too hung up on that and then lose track of the overall what we're trying to do. I think what reminds me of that is you were referencing the newsletter that you put out about the different masks that we wear. And it really relates to this imposter syndrome. And there were some typos and things in it. And when
Oh
I read
gosh.
it, I didn't
Yes.
even notice because I was so sucked into the story and what you were talking about and the content. I was so focused on the content of it that I didn't even see when you told me there were all these mistakes. I was like, really? I didn't even see it. So you were still able to really communicate and accomplish the goal of what you were trying to write, even though it wasn't perfect.
Mhm. And that really and so everybody knows, I probably talked about this with Natalie about 3 or 4 times already going, "Oh my gosh, I am so embarrassed about what I put out." But, even when we put out B- work and not intentionally, sometimes I do it intentionally. This was not one of them, but, even intentionally, we can still get our point across. We can still be effective in communicating, building those teams, creating those results, or just communicating a concept like I was doing this week in the Connected Life Coaching newsletter. Um, and yes, I do choose to have embarrassment. A lot of times here in life coaching, we talk about choosing what experience you want to have for it. I am choosing embarrassment because I want to remember to do a little more, proofreading before I put it out next time again. But it's not that type of embarrassment that will keep me from, putting it out before because I figured, well, I've done this. If I can walk away and leave it as it is, then I can truly, create other things without distraction. Because if I'm not distracted by, oh my gosh, what if there's a typo? Well, oh my gosh, what if there's a grammatical error? I'm so much more likely to get this out because people need to know what I have learned over the last couple of years, because it creates life transformations. And if it includes some typos or some grammatical errors, like what happened this week, then that's the way it comes. Obviously, Natalie, you thought it was just as effective.
Yeah, I really did. And that's such a tool right there because I think often when we decide to try something new or go at a new venture, a lot of what holds us back as individuals is a fear of making mistakes or a fear of not having it perfect. And I think so much doesn't get done then out of that fear. Whereas if you just put it forward and you create what you're creating, you do what you're doing and don't get so
Mhm,
hung up on, it being so perfect, you're accomplishing your goal. And mistakes can be corrected. That's a thing at the end of the day.
mhm.
I religiously have typos or yeah, I'll reread something 3 times and still there'll be something I'll be like, oh my gosh, I missed that. And then it gets fixed. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
the message still gets out. Things are still going forward. I feel that nobody is paying as close attention to what any of us are saying or doing than we are.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm. We got a little comment here from Molly. For you, Annette, it says, Annette, you teach so well the concept of separating thoughts from facts. Would this be a great way to handle self doubt?
Oh, yes, yes. Self-doubt is one of those things that is definitely part of the imposter syndrome because we have determined that, they're going to find us out. We are definitely thinking that we're not as much as we could be or that we should be. Those have tos and those shoulds. And so the self-doubt is one of those things that most of us let run its course. Well, it's almost like, as a realtor, you have these buyers that go, when I walk in, then I'll know it when I see it. And, even I was a realtor for a long time, and it was so frustrating because it was like, well, yeah, but how can I choose a house for you if you just tell me I'll know it when I see it? How can I actually be of help? Well, the same holds true for us and how we can handle self-doubt. If we just take some time to really see what is going on, we separate the facts from the thoughts. In life coaching, what Molly is talking about is we spend a lot of time talking about what are absolute facts. Now, these absolute facts can land at our doorstep and we don't like them, but that is just a thought. That is optional, if you will. Facts are something that if you lined up all the humans in the world, they would all agree. And facts in and of themselves are neutral. And you're like, well, but what about this or what about that? That's just horrible. Or why would they do that? The thing is that let's say you have a person who's done this horrible thing and you have this other person, maybe us, that we're going, oh my gosh, that's awful. We should definitely judge that. We should definitely, do it. But the thing is that that person who did it actually got something positive to them, something positive out of it. They didn't think it was horrible. We think it is horrible. The difference between the two means that that goes into the thought line as opposed to being a circumstance. If we have an extreme example, one of my favorite examples is 9/11 was the worst day in modern American history. Is that a fact or is that a thought?
I
Or what
suppose it
is
would would
fact
be would
and
be
what
a thought because it would be for some, but maybe not for others.
Mhm. Because for the guys who flew the planes into the buildings, that was a glorious day for them.
Mm.
For the rest of us here, that was a horrible day. The fact that that there were planes, that there were pilots, that there were terrorists, there were, that buildings came down and things like that, all of those are facts. From there, then we have our thoughts. We have our automatic thoughts that we talked about before, the ones that come from that fight or flight type of place. And then we have those that come from our prefrontal cortex or our decision making side of our brain. And really, what happens is that those automatic thoughts come, as it says, automatically. It is then up to us to determine, do we want to let those continue to ride, or are we going to choose to think something else and create the experience that we want? What came of 9/11? I mean, we saw communities come together like we have never seen in our history. We saw people flying the American flag all over the United States in places that it never had. That sense of patriotism, that sense of bringing together. I'm hoping that that bringing together can happen in our lifetime again without something so tragic happening again. But all of those people took that horrible situation that, most Americans thought was horrible and turned it into a way to connect to their community, turned it in a way to remember what those things that they do love about being in this country, whether they're citizens or not. And so you have these ways that you can perceive things, and then you have a choice. Do I just want to sit in grief and disbelief? Does that actually help me or help anything move forward? Or do I want to come alongside? Look how we have honored and really stepped up to see our first responders since then. It's night and day. And they've always been heroes. They've always walked into those fires or created those, you know, been those people who were willing to face those things that many of us are not. And now we honor them so much more since then. That is the difference between taking, one of those situations and, how are the many ways that we decide that we're going to see it? And now what are we going to do from there? If we're in overwhelm, if we're in fear, we don't do anything. But when we decide we're going to honor, we're going to not forget, we're going to remember, we're going to go in a different direction, that's when we create change and differences in this world. And so when you think about that self-doubt, you have that same exact opportunity in your head as well. You've got two parts. You've got your automatic side, which is going to try to shut you down because literally it keeps you safe. It's doing its job. But remembering the prefrontal cortex, that you do have a choice, that you can step forward and go, I can continue on doing it that way, or I wonder how else I want to experience. And you do this by thinking, how do I want to show up as how do I want to show up in this? How do I want to experience this? That will help me, that will help others, that will just move things forward.
And that's a great way right there to, I think when we're feeling that, we're talking about imposter syndrome and that feeling of self doubt, and that even though things are going well, surely I don't know what I'm doing. Stopping and looking at it that way and recognizing that, not going down the rabbit hole with all of the self doubt, it's such a turning point, because I know times when I made the choice to go, okay, what is the fact, taking the step back, what is the actual true fact and reality of the situation. Well, I'm creating something that's going really well, which would indicate that I know what I'm doing. And I know what I'm
Mhm.
doing. It's just like you said, that self doubt where that fight or flight comes in for whatever reason. And I've noticed the more that I've practiced that and used those tools that you're mentioning, the less it happens. Even in
Mhm.
other areas, it just things just go a little bit more lickety split and more. Of course, that's the outcome, because that is exactly what I was going for. That's exactly what I
Mhm.
was trying to create and what I'm doing. And that's just a game changer. So it's such a valuable tool. And I think you really hit it out of the park on the explanation and gave us some tools and things to think about when it comes to imposter syndrome. Before we wrap up, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, if anybody's interested in that newsletter, you can find it out at connectedlifecoaching.net. Right at the bottom of the page, you just click there. You'll get it every week, and we will talk about different life coaching tools. There'll be a story. I've got movie clips that have gone in there. Theater references. I guess I kind of like the acting, and as well as the tools and practical stories that you can use in your own life. So feel free to get on that, and you will be up to date with everything that's going on, as well as links to the replays for Life Coach Friday, which we will be back doing that in 2 weeks.
That's right. Every other Friday, streaming on multiple community pages, because Life Coach Friday is a way for all of us to learn tools to create better communities wherever we are. So, everybody, have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.